Good morning. I'm State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal, and I'm here at the old Capitol building in Olympia. Our facility, like many now, are under a vaccine mandate as a condition of being state employees. We'll talk about that a bit here. And we are under a mask mandate, so we are wearing masks here in Thurston County in all of our facilities. As of today, I'm removing it for purposes of our conference, and we'll put it back on immediately after. We've had two goals that have become abundantly clear through the duration of the pandemic. First and foremost is the health and safety of our students and our staff in all of our school buildings across the state. It has been the priority of the governor for all of its citizens, all of the citizens of Washington, and in my role as state superintendent, constitutionally established, I took an oath to uphold the laws of the Constitution of the state of Washington. In that pretty powerful role, you take to heart the ultimate goal here of any job, which is health and safety of our students, and in this case, our staff. The second goal that became very clear, and you heard us talk about it in the last several months, is opening our schools to full-time in-person learning for every family who chooses that for the upcoming school year. We saw the impacts of nearly fully remote school last year in many parts of our state. There were a lot of positives and a lot of growth and a lot of successes. We learned a lot. We became better at that. But from attendance data to academic data by letter grades, we saw impact, and we want to avoid that. Both of those core mandates right now, health and safety and the in-person return of our students and staff to learning in our buildings, is at risk. Delta has changed that. We were on a trajectory of tremendous success here. We still can be and will be if we follow some additional safety measures. But Delta is a very different strain. It is dramatically more transmissible than we saw in the Alpha variant. People are getting it in much greater numbers. The viral load is as big as it has been. They are shedding the virus. We are seeing some breakthrough cases, but thankfully we are not seeing the hospitalizations for those who have been vaccinated. The vaccines work. Vaccines work. It is the science of vaccines that demonstrates this for us. The cases for 0 to 19-year-olds in the state of Washington, so I'm not talking about Florida or Texas or Mississippi or high-profile states that are fighting reasonable health precautions. I'm talking about a state that has been exceedingly successful relative to the country. In our state right now, from June to July, cases for 0 to 19-year-olds, our school age and preschool age population, grew by between 60 and 80%, depending on the age cohort within that. We're seeing cases rise, hospitalizations rise across the state. We are a state that during the duration of this pandemic is roughly 2.5% of the US population, but only 1% of the cases, 1% of the hospitalizations, and thankfully, 1% of the loss of life across the country. We have put health and safety first and foremost, and it has mattered. We have saved thousands of lives in the state of Washington as a result of this. But Delta is making the risk imminent once more. Without additional measures, keeping schools open will be a challenge. I cannot reiterate this enough. For those folks who are frustrated by mask requirements or vaccine requirements, they need to understand the consequences of a variant like Delta impacting us as it is clearly doing in parts of the country with devastating impacts. We will have to shut down schools. We will have to shut down buildings or quarantine significant numbers of students on a regular basis. That disruption of learning has a big impact on our learners, on our families, our economy. We know how devastating this was, particularly for working moms in the last year. We can open schools safely on time this year with measures. We can keep them open, but it is going to require additional measures not yet taken, but ones that I am recommending. So I have sent a letter to Governor Inslee. I have asked him to expand the vaccine requirement with the corresponding exemption opportunities for those who do not want to vaccinate. The same requirement he has placed upon all state employees and healthcare professionals. I am asking him to expand those to all school personnel, every part of our state, every employee in the public school system. The governor will have to make decisions should he go this route, and I'm confident that he will, but he will have to make more detailed decisions about other sectors, early learning. There are certainly other places where I believe personally this could apply. My scope and control is over public schools, and that's my recommendation to the governor. So what is it? It's a vaccine requirement as a condition of employment with two very important exemptions: a medical exemption for those who have an underlying health condition or a documented risk of a vaccine, and that's very real. We have a certain percentage of our society who have legitimate medical needs for that kind of exemption. And the second one is a religious exemption. As it stands today, state employees are under that same construct, and I know that officials at Department of Health and other agencies are working on the details of how to document that, and we will consistently follow that should the governor follow through on my recommendation here. It is a false narrative to say that it's a choice between getting a vaccine and losing your job. There are exemptions, and that's important. Many folks have said, why not testing? California is going to also offer weekly testing. I want to be very clear about that. Testing is a very important part of the overall health layers that we have. More than 200 school districts are signed up for a testing regime as part of their mitigation strategy. But it doesn't have the same foolproof, it does not have the same efficacy as masking, where we reduce droplets and we reduce the spread of the virus by collecting it near to our persons. And it doesn't have the same effectiveness as a vaccine, which has been remarkably effective around the country and around the world. We still encourage districts to have testing plans. Again, 2/3 of them do, and we encourage all of them to have that. But it is not the kind of framework that a masking and a vaccine requirement provides in terms of mitigating the spread. It merely tests once you have it. This does not apply to students. I cannot say that loud enough or enough times. There is a process we understand around student vaccinations in this state that we understand and expect to be upheld. It includes authorization of the vaccine for students, and right now students ages birth to 11 are not eligible for a vaccine at all from the three major providers, and so there's a process to make that occur. We do hope that comes soon. We continue to hear that perhaps October or November, but that's not something we're close to. There's a full process at the CDC. There's a panel that is held at the federal level, then it gets moved to the states, where each state board of health considers whether or not to make a vaccine mandatory as a condition of going to school. We have many of them in our state already. I cannot reiterate enough, having looked at the data, the rate of compliance around that is roughly 90 to 93%, going back many, many years in this state. Families understand the power of vaccines, and they comply with those, and there are reasonable exemptions to that as well. So this request to the governor is not for students. There's a lot of process remaining as I understand it. I'll certainly let the governor make his own determination about that, but my request is for all the employees of our public school system. School will start on time. This is not a delay to the start of our school or our requirement that districts provide an in-person learning opportunity for every family who wants it. This is not a pause in that. We can move forward with our school starts, some of them next week, many of them 2 weeks later, and most districts after Labor Day should move forward. We believe we have vaccination rates right now in the roughly 70% range as we informally talk to educational service district leaders, superintendents, educators, and associations across the state. That does mean that 40 or 50,000 school personnel right now, though, are unvaccinated, and thus the importance of creating that protection layer around kids and other staff members. We become, as we say in our family, that mama bear, papa bear. When your kids are potentially at risk, you do whatever you have to do between harm and that child. And in this case, vaccines can do that for the last 40 or 50,000 personnel in our school system. State employees have until October 18th. Under that framework, we will leave it up to the governor, should he choose to follow through on this recommendation, to determine if that timeline still makes sense for folks to ultimately get their second shot in the case of Moderna, Pfizer, or their first shot in the case of J&J, and then there's a 2-week period after that when you are considered fully vaccinated. That timeline may be different based on the expertise of the Department of Health and the governor, and we'll leave that up to them should they go this route. I give you the airplane analogy. We are learning a lot about this, and air travel today is much safer than it was even 10 years ago and certainly 20 years ago. And it's because out ahead of that flight pattern that you're on in your plane are other planes who have traveled it. They've come to your direction, or they were ahead of you on an earlier flight or in the region. We get real-time data about that. It's why we have a seatbelt sign that says, hey, you can move about the cabin, but there are times that the pilot's going to tell you to sit down. And you turn that light on and you sit down and you think, this is a smooth flight. Why did we do this? Because they already have information about what's coming. In the state of Washington, 1 in 14 people has gotten COVID, and more of them are getting it. 1 in 19 of those people will end up in a hospital based on our last 18 months of experience. 1 out of 5 people who end up in a hospital lose their life. There is turbulence ahead, and we can see it in the data and the research. We can see it when we don't follow mask orders. We can see it when we don't vaccinate. In states with low vaccination rates, the cases are exploding, hospitalizations are up, and loss of life is increasing. And we can see that coming if we don't take additional steps. We have 2 mandates: health and safety of our students and staff, and the in-person learning experience that is so rich for our students and for our educators. That is what we are trying to protect as we see that turbulence coming that we know we can avoid. The courts have upheld vaccine mandates for a very long time, going back to 1905. Even as of yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court denied on appeal a case out of the 7th Circuit Court, I believe, where students were challenging a vaccine mandate of a university. Courts have consistently said, as a public health measure, vaccine mandates are absolutely in the authority of public agencies and organizations, and they often point to necessary exemptions as part of that process. A vaccine requirement, but do you allow for medical exemptions? Do you allow, in this case, for a religious, deeply held conviction? Consistent treatment from the courts that these are upheld. And so too will the governor's order for state employees, and I hope his extension of this to school employees. We consulted with district leaders from all over the state, association leaders, both principals, superintendents, school boards, labor leaders, obviously the governor's office, Department of Health, Labor and Industries. We have a long group of folks that we try to work through before we come to these decisions. And I want to be very candid. Some of them, particularly some school districts, are very, very concerned about this. Their presumption is they have employee shortages already, and this may drive more shortages. And I respect that difficulty. We considered that, we heard that goes into the consideration. But on balance, this request of the governor undoubtedly will save lives and keep our schools open. I will reiterate, it is not get a vaccine or lose your job. There are exemptions eligible to employees, and I expect many of them will take those exemptions to continue their employment. I reiterate to those districts that are concerned, we are starting school on time. This is not a delay. This does not close schools. This, in fact, keeps our schools open when we do it well. My personal appeal to all students who are eligible and all school personnel is please, please get vaccinated. We live in a time of unbelievable profit around misinformation. It is everywhere, and it is understandable that people read things that are completely inaccurate and wonder what to believe. I follow the CDC. I follow the Department of Health. I follow professionals in this work because I am not an epidemiologist or a virologist or an expert in this. So I have to trust expertise. And right now we are in a cultural battle between trusting the expertise of those who have historically led us through difficult times, including vaccine requirements that have literally saved humanity. And we get a moment right now to do the same thing or continue to fall prey to those who profit off of misinformation, fear, and anger. So please, to all of you, do your own research again, find credible sources. I think you will conclude that vaccinations are absolutely the right way to go for yourself and for your family, for our students, our schools, our communities, our state, our planet. We have 2 million Washingtonians right now eligible for vaccines that have not yet made that choice, and I encourage them to please do that. I will also say that this is a game of probability and math, and sadly this is a dangerous game. I've done this in a video as an analogy. But this virus mutates like all viruses. Part of our collective goal is to have enough of us with immunity and enough of us who are immunized and enough of us protected with masks and face coverings that we don't get it. Because as it infects more people, you get more permutations of this virus, and eventually you get to Delta, or perhaps worse. We literally help people all over the planet by vaccinating and wearing a mask because we reduce the probability of variants that can become so dangerous they begin to escape the vaccines that we have. We owe this to our collective humanity. We owe this to the world, to our children, to our grandchildren. We are alive today because our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and our elders before us vaccinated. We owe that to future generations. Please get vaccinated. Please keep our schools open by doing this. Please keep yourselves and others healthy and safe. Lastly, I want to briefly touch base on the mask order. Many of you have asked about this. The governor issued a mask requirement in our schools, again, because we have so many people unvaccinated, because it is a mitigating strategy that is very, very effective. There is very clear research about this. I have said, and I will continue to uphold my constitutional duties. I swear an oath in this office, like any elected official, to uphold the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington. The governor's orders in the state of Washington and in almost every state have the power of law. It comes with written language in the law that it is a gross misdemeanor to violate a governor order. And therefore, I have nothing but respect for local school boards who are concerned about a mask order, but they are willfully violating the law if they make a choice to pass a resolution in direct violation of any law, including a governor's order. And as a constitutional officer myself, I have to uphold the law. I cannot look the other way for a willful violation that puts the safety of our children at risk. So I say to all school board members and school leaders, thank you for all of you who are following through with this. I know it can be frustrating, but the law is clear here. Local board authority is about educational decisions of who you're going to hire, how you're going to configure your elementary, middle, and high school, what textbooks are you going to adopt in your district. School board authority does not extend to the life and death choices of a pandemic emergency. Those are left to the governor, the State Department of Health, or in some cases to a local health officer. We will uphold the law. We will unfortunately find ourselves having to suspend apportionment funds for districts who willfully violate that through a board action. I'll say once more, this is not about an individual who disagrees. There are processes for that at the local level. This is for boards who willfully violate the law and put their students and staff in danger in violation of the governor's order or any law in the state of Washington. Yesterday it was reported, or maybe this morning, 4 educators have died in one school district in Florida, Broward County. 3 of them are confirmed to have been unvaccinated. Loss of life that was preventable. And I pray for those families and for all the citizens of Florida, all of the citizens of the United States. Preventable death has never been a controversy until today. Now we live in a moment where we are debating our individual liberties that have always had a regulation to them. We have always had freedoms, but with responsibilities. And today, there are too many people making a decision and making an exclamation about risking the lives of themselves and their peers and their communities over something that has always been measured and always regulated. So I don't want to start our school year hearing and reading about the loss of life of educators. This state has been a leader in the nation in keeping cases, hospitalizations, deaths down, and I will not yield to that purpose. We will do that, and we can open school and keep them open. If we mask up, we follow the law, we join hands in this together, and now I hope the governor will take my request for a vaccine requirement with the appropriate exemptions and add that layer of protection that continues to keep us a leader in the nation in health and safety and restores consistently the powerful learning that happens in our buildings, our athletics, our extracurriculars, and all the relationship building that goes on in our public school system. Appreciate your time. I know there are a lot of questions. I will do my best to repeat questions so folks hear them who are online, and let us get going on that. And I am here.
Superintendent, the governor's office says that, well, they're looking at ways to increase vaccination rates. They're not ready to make any announcements on your request yet. Aren't we running out of time, or is it already too late? The school year starts in less than a month for most. The logistics of getting the vaccinations done, if someone started today, would not be ready in that time.
Yeah.
Are you expecting to start the school year with this mandate and some teachers being held back from coming? How logistically would this work out if the governor were to agree with you?
Yeah, the question is really the timing of this. Given the school year start, is it too late? Do we expect districts to hold back starts or educators not to come in? The answer is no to that. We will start school. We can continue to move forward. State employees have until October 18th. Again, lots of vaccinations are in place already. But we can move forward because we have these protective layers. This is, again, that turbulence that's coming. So I don't expect delays in the start of school, and everyone needs to show up for their jobs on this and continue to work forward. I would like to have seen this even a week ago would have been more powerful than a week later, but it is never too late. It is never too late unless we find ourselves in the middle of the school year shutting things down because we didn't do this now. So it's appropriate to move now, to move expeditiously. We do have time, and thankfully so many educators and staff have already made the choice to get vaccinated that we are building that protective layer around our students and staff. This is that next step to really ensure it. Other questions?
We've got a couple questions in the chat box from Jerry Cornfield from the Everett Herald. He's first asking if you support a mandate for students, and will you be asking the State Board of Health to issue that kind of mandate?
Thank you. The question is, how does this apply to students, and do I support a mandate for students, and will I advocate for that when the timing is appropriate with the State Board of Health? This request of the governor from me does not include students at this point in time. He will have to determine if that's a priority for him or if it's within his emergency powers. That is not my request here. Mine is merely to extend the state employee requirement of adults to school employees. I do support a vaccine mandate for students, as I have the current mandates for students, with the appropriate exemptions authorized for parents to make that choice. We have high vaccination rates in this state. It has allowed our students to be healthy and safe. I will support that for this when it goes through the full process and it comes before the State Board of Health. If they make a determination to consider that, at this point, I will absolutely support that for students as a requirement to enroll in our schools as we do with other vaccines.
I have another question from Jerry Cornfield, Everett Herald. He's asked, how many school boards have passed resolutions to not follow the mask mandate, and what actions have you taken, and how much money have you withheld from those school districts?
Question is, have any school districts so far willfully violated the mask order of the governor, and what actions have we taken and how much resource? At this point, we do not have a belief. We don't understand that any districts have formally adopted resolutions in violation of the law, and we are thankful for that. We encourage them not to do that. Do not put your district, your community, your students at risk, both from a safety and financial standpoint. What we will do is begin an emergency rule process to make clear for districts how that will work, likely withholding their September apportionment and likely prorating a permanent reduction to their budgets if they go that route. We do not expect them to do that, but because we have some folks, including a few lawmakers, encouraging a willful violation of the law, we have to be prepared in case that occurs. At this point, we do not have any information that any district has done that.
We do not have any further questions.
I would love to ask another one, Superintendent. I imagine there is a projection of how many employees may quit as a result of this. Do you have a plan in case there are a large number of teachers that don't follow this mandate if we get the mandate? And do you see schools having to combine or shut down, or is there a scenario, a binder somewhere that has this plan in case we do see some folks ignore this order and quit?
Yeah, no, there are no projections about that. This is obviously a very dynamic situation, and there's no way to really model that. I would reiterate that employees have the opportunity under this request to vaccinate or take an exemption. It is not a binary choice to vaccinate or lose your job or quit your job. There may be some who do that. They will understandably say, I am not vaccinating, I choose not to do that for myself, and I choose not to seek an exemption authorized under this request, they will unfortunately lose their employment. They will be eligible for some unemployment benefits, I understand, if it's consistent with the order provided for state employees. And districts will have to make very, very difficult adjustments to that. Again, the deadline recommended here is consistent with state employees, so that's certainly down the road. Give people some time to think about it, but districts at this point have weeks and perhaps months even to really consider how to respond to that. I don't anticipate it's a lot, but there is real concern there. Maybe not so much in our classroom teachers. We keep getting consistent feedback that those vaccination rates are very high. Again, we're not collecting that data right now because that's a voluntary disclosure by employees, but district officials feel that educators in the classroom have a very high vaccination rate, perhaps well in excess of 70-75%, but a little tougher numbers in some of our other employee groups. I've heard consistently from districts, bus drivers have them concerned. We already have a consistent shortage there. That's a hard job to fill at times. There's background checks and fingerprinting and things that go along in training. So there is some real concern, and we've taken that into consideration. They will have to make some tough choices, perhaps adjust schedules. I still don't anticipate that being large numbers of folks.
Finally, go ahead.
Will people that take an exemption legitimately be welcome to interact with students?
Yeah, the exemption is under all prior legal frameworks around this. It allows them to fully conduct the scope of their employment. They'll still be subject to mask requirements, any distancing requirements, hygiene, all of the other mitigation measures. But it does reconcile the fact that some people have deeply held beliefs about this, and that's what the courts expect you to honor in this. And again, if you're listening to the public health experts, they consistently tell us we can tolerate some percentage of people not getting a natural immunity or a vaccine. We have to create a bigger buffer though than what we have today. We need to get to that 80-90% mark, and we're not there yet, and that poses very serious risk for everybody. So this is the appropriate next step. It respects individual choice. I do believe it will mitigate impacts on employment when people know they have this choice, but I also expect a lot of people to walk right up to that final decision and say, am I really not going to take a scientifically based, proven vaccine given to billions of people on this planet ultimately, and certainly close to that, that is protecting people and keeping people out of hospitals finally, keeping them from losing their life? Will I not do that? And if not, you have an exemption process. I expect a lot of folks to walk up to that and go, it's time. It is time.
You make it seem like the exemption is going to be pretty easy for folks. I mean, is it as simple as checking a box and no questions after that? Because if you make it that easy, I think you'll see a lot of people doing that. Will there have to be some proof of a religious connection or something? Or can folks just say, I'm opting out?
The question is, what does that process look like, particularly for a religious exemption? That's being determined, I believe, right now by Department of Health, perhaps State Department of Personnel, because they already have to figure out that framework for state employees, and I would expect that to be consistent for school employees. I don't know the details of what that will look like. Generally, these things have individuals attest to a deeply held belief about this. And so this might be one of the rare occasions where there's essentially an attestation for the individual, but that will be up to personnel officials in the state of Washington, should the governor apply that to us. But they are already working on that for state employees.
Couple more.
Last thing I had was, does this end with your letter and this discussion here, or is this going to happen? I know you've talked to the governor about this. Can we expect an announcement, maybe not in the next couple of days, but next week on this?
Well, that will certainly be up to the governor. I never want to speak for Governor Inslee or his team. We have kept them up to speed. We've helped them understand. They have consistently understood our interest here. They have indicated that there is a process that I think they're trying to observe that continues to include more employee groups in the vaccine requirement. I am very confident that we are going to be near to the next step in that cycle. I hope for an announcement next week by the governor. I expect it, but that is because I believe we've understood the intent of this governor to keep us healthy and safe and to increase vaccinations, but ultimately that is up to the governor to decide.
Monica Velez from the Seattle Times asked, have you received any pushback from labor unions, and are most on board with this?
The question is specifically, have we received pushback from labor unions about this? As part of our large reach to try to understand the potential implications of this, labor is one of the groups, and there are multiple bargaining units in the state of Washington that represent teachers, bus drivers, custodians, all kinds of folks. We've tried to contact 5 or 6 of them. I think all of them consistently understand the need. They consistently understand why the timing of this, and to try to give us as much time as we can before the school year starts. But I think there probably are some of them who would continue to say if there were even more options for employees, that would be better than having fewer. I would encourage any of you seeking that question, writing your stories, or covering this to reach out to them and get a personal statement from them. I never want to speak for them, as I don't speak for the governor. I thought the reception from them was incredibly positive, but they're doing their jobs to represent their membership, and they want undoubtedly more choices, generally speaking. I have made this recommendation based on all of that feedback, and you have heard the choices that I support. Medical and religious, because of a deeply held philosophical belief.
I have another question from Jerry Cornfield, Everett Herald. He asked, which lawmakers are calling on districts to willfully violate the law?
Yeah, the question is which lawmakers are calling on districts to willfully violate the law. I will leave that up to all of you to do your research. I believe it has been documented in Southwest Washington. There have been rallies. I believe yesterday there were ubiquitous rallies around the state calling for the removal of masks as a requirement. Several lawmakers participated in that statewide. I would encourage you to call them and ask them why they believe that. I won't speak for them.
We don't have any other questions from folks joining virtually.
If there are no other questions here, I'll just conclude again with a thank you to our educators, our parents, our students, our communities. We are always in uncertain times in a pandemic. There is no blueprint. We cannot look necessarily to other places because they're going through it at the same time, but we can understand what has worked and what has not worked. We knocked down the first couple waves of this primarily through face coverings, and then ultimately we got a handle on this thing as vaccinations began to become more widespread in our communities. The problem is we still have 2 million Washingtonians, 100 million Americans, and billions of people around the world without a vaccine. So we are getting mutations of this virus, and we are getting strains and variants that unfortunately do what they do. They attempt to infect and multiply in their host. And if we don't vaccinate and take this global, national, Washington state, community, school priority seriously, we're going to see more of that. So again, I urge you all to vaccinate if you are eligible. It is safe, it is effective, it keeps us out of hospitals now for the most part, and it creates a protective barrier for those who cannot vaccinate or are not vaccinated yet. Bring out your mama bear and your papa bear. This is serious. We have outbreaks all over the South right now, just as they're starting school, in large part because they are not vaccinating, or in even bigger parts because they won't wear face coverings as a matter of their ideology. That is not Washington State. We have demonstrated the effectiveness of our safety protocols, and we're going to do it again this school year. And now with vaccines, we can open schools broadly, keep them open, and keep folks safe. Mask up, get your vaccines. Thank you for being a Washingtonian committed to this shared interest. Thanks, everyone.